Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, we're ready to begin. In this week we have Emor. It's a mix of different things. But principally there's a couple of themes in the parasha. Should go for just a second. The beginning of it is the laws of the Kohanim. Emor Allah Kohanim. And at the end of it, we have a section that's familiar because it goes through the list of the holidays. And it's familiar because we read it a lot on the various holidays. It talks about, among other things, the counting of the Omer, which is the season that we're in now. We discussed last week. But it runs through the whole schedule, starting with Shabbos, of course, Shabbat, and then all the other holidays, beginning with Pesach and ending with Shmini Atzeres, Sukkot.
What's the sukkah you on?
We're just giving a summary, but it begins, it's Vayikra, Perikov Aleph is the beginning of the...
Yeah.
Right. And then there's a little incident at the end. So just begin with a little bit of halacha like we did last week. And since this is, first of all, the parasha where we talk about Yom Tov, and because we have a Yom Tov coming up, I thought it would be timely to speak for a few minutes about the laws of Yom Tov. I also was recently reading those laws in the Mishnah Berurah, which makes it timely as well. Actually, that was because you have the way it's set up is you have Pesach and then Omer and then Shavuos and then laws of Yom Tov. So it's kind of natural. The laws of Yom Tov are unique. Well, first of all, they're not as widely known. It doesn't come up as often, and they're very similar to the laws of Shabbos, but slightly different. Some of the ways that they're different are a little bit not concrete. So the basic difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos is what we call in the Torah Ochel Nefesh. Things that are necessary for eating are permitted, which work which is permitted which is necessary for eating is permitted. So of the 39 types of work which we don't do on Shabbos, a certain number of those tasks are food related. The most obvious one being cooking. So cooking is one of the 39 malachos. And you can't cook on Shabbos when you could cook on Yom Tov. That's a simple concept. We have other things like lighting a fire, which is a separate malacha, a different item on the list of 39. We do that on Yom Tov too, but we don't create a fire that's new. We can use an existing fire to light another candle, or to light a stovetop if it's a gas stovetop, and that kind of thing. I don't remember the reason why, but lighting one candle from another is just as much on Shabbos, striking a match, to light a candle or lighting one candle from another are equally considered malacha, equally considered forms of fire, whereas in Yom Tov, striking a match is not okay, but lighting a candle from an existing candle is okay. What gets a little bit hazier is, what if I want to build a house because it's raining and I can't eat in the rain? Is that considered ochel nefesh? The answer is no. What if I want to plant beans? I want to make one of those bean plants. You wrap the beans in the wet paper towel and put it in a cup and it starts to grow. You say, well, no, that's not ochel nefesh. Well, why not? Eating, stuff that you need for eating.
For immediate use.
So for immediate use is an answer, but that's not really exactly the correct. It shows that you have it shows that you've learned a thing or two, right? For immediate use, and that's an important point. But in this context, it's not strictly correct because really, when you use the word immediate use, let's say for example, we use that on Shabbos as well. Certain things are permitted for immediate use. Right. So. Well, that's why. Right. So immediate use means immediate use. So, for example, on Shabbos, one malacha on Shabbos, one of the 39 is sorting, borer. So sorting means, if you think of it as the way they would make bread. So you plant the wheat, cut the wheat down, bang the stalks to get the kernels off, separate the grain from the shell, sift it. So those acts of separating what you want from what you don't want is a form of work. It's part of the process of how you get bread out of the ground. On Shabbos, it's also a malacha. So if you have a bowl of nuts with shells in it, you separate what you want from what you don't want. It's like sifting the grain, and it's forbidden. But in some cases, it's permitted for immediate use. So if I'm going to eat now, and I have a bowl of nuts, and I want to take the nuts on my plate and leave the shells in the bowl, that's okay. The three conditions: you take what you want to eat now by hand, and that's okay, as opposed to if I remove the parts that I don't want, that's more of a processing thing. If I'm getting rid of the bad stuff, that's like work. Taking what I want is eating. I have to do it for immediate use because I'm eating, and I have to do it by hand as opposed to using any kind of tool. So that's okay. But it means that if I'm going to eat in 2 hours, but it will take me, we're having a dinner, so it'll take me 2 hours to set up. So I got to do the chairs and that's all considered immediate. But if I'm going to separate the food, go out, walk around the block, and come back, that's not considered immediate, even though it's only 3 minutes. Because immediate means it's leading right up to eating, as opposed to. So that's an important definition. But on Yom Tov, you don't have to do things for immediate use. For example, you can cook food in the morning, go to shul, and come back and eat it. Right. So that type of immediate isn't strictly required on Yom Tov. Okay. Right.
So
and
it
does have to
not for dinner then.
That's right. Okay. So it has to be for that day, but not for the next day. And that's why, as Mrs. Joseph pointed out, you could put beans on a Yom Tov evening into the cup, and then have bean sprouts the next morning. So you could argue that planting beans is okay for that day, right? It's not immediate. The answer is that even if something isn't for immediate use, and even if something is for that day, it doesn't mean that it's okay to do it on Yom Tov, because there's a list of tasks that are considered to be okay, and a list of tasks that are not. And basically, those activities that are close to the eating process. So, again, the rabbi kind of classified from planting. Planting is actually, the first step is plowing, right before you plant, digging a hole in the ground. That's not okay. You can't dig a hole in the ground, even if you're going to bury your apples in the hot ground, and that's not okay. Digging a hole is not one of the things that is included in eating. Planting is not included. Cutting, harvesting, right? It's not part of it. So, who's going to harvest it? Well, what if you have an apple tree and you pull an apple off the tree? That's not okay. Those processes are too removed. We're talking about the classifications that I gave was kneading and onward. So when you have the flour in your house, right? So you're not harvesting, threshing, grinding. Grinding is a separate discussion. But you have the flour and you're mixing it with the water. That's one of the 39 malachas, right? Kneading, risha is not allowed on Shabbos. Kneading, baking, these kinds of things are okay in Yom Tov, but earlier processes are not. Now, there is, I believe, the question, were those things excluded from the Torah's entire allowance on Yom Tov, or was it a rabbinic thing? Now, some say that the rabbis told us not to do certain things because they're usually done as part of a large scale. So if you're a farmer, right, when you're grinding your grain, you don't go and say, I need bread for dinner, let me grind some grain. You harvest your whole field, you bring it to the miller has a job, he has a gigantic windmill. So the rabbi said, if we let you do things like that on Yom Tov, you're going to spend your whole day, say, it's all nice. We'll schedule the milling for Shavuos. That will be our activity because we can't do anything else. And your Yom Tov will look like a work day. So it was the rabbis who said it's not okay. And whether it's from the Torah or from the rabbis or both, those mixing flour and water, sorting, in most cases it's okay on Yom Tov, separating the things that it doesn't have all the restrictions that usually have. fires, carrying. Those are things that are close to the eating process. Um, what? Well, that's cooking.
Even for washing.
Yeah. So okay. So you're touching on an important point. When we say ochel nefesh, we say for food, right? The question is how you define food. So the rabbi said it doesn't have to be strictly food. It's anything that I need for today, at least physically, even if it's not actually food. So hot water for washing dishes,
Carrying your book.
carrying your book that you want to read, right? Or something you need for your clothing, carrying your clothing. Those are all things that are okay. Interestingly, they say if a person discovers chametz in their house on Pesach, that's not okay because it's not something I need. Burning it is not, it's a mitzvah, but it doesn't serve any need for me. No, so they say, what's they say you cover it with something. First of all, you already said kol chamira, so you don't really own it, and you sold it to another. Anyways, they say there's discussions. If a person really didn't do any of those things, and they find the chametz, maybe they are supposed to burn it because opinion. Certainly, what we do today, we do a few things that even if we find the chametz, it's not really mine. So, but that's not considered a need because it doesn't do anything for me. It's just my obligation. But things that I need, I can do work for things that I need, and the types of work that are allowed. Right? You can't say, well, I'm hot. Can I build myself? Can I have an umbrella, a sun umbrella? Can I stick it in the ground and open it up? Right? That's building. I can't do that on Yom Tov, even though it does solve a need, because building was not one of the ochel nefesh categories of work at all. But lighting a fire, whether it's for food, or whether it's for heat, or whether it's for medicine, whatever it is, if it's something that I need, then it's allowed on Yom Tov, but it has to be something that I need and something that I need on that day, not something that I need on a different day. Right? So that's so. When we say for immediate use, we mean for use on that day. And that day means beginning, like the day it starts at nightfall, goes till sunset, and so that's.
So, Rabbi, I have a question. Like, I thought that you could cook what you needed right before the meal. You couldn't get up from your evening Yom Tov meal and cook your lunch.
You could.
You could?
You could. The issue is, so there's one other issue, and that's also a discussion, that an argument, and that happens when only one person on the phone. Yes. Now I'm dialed in twice. Okay, so.
Oh, okay. I lost it.
No, I'm done. No, now we have three. So, okay. The issue is that when something could be done before Yom Tov, the question is, do I have a license to do it? So, let me say, many foods, bread, meat, those things are always better fresh. Even shechting. Shechting is allowed in Yom Tov. So you can chef the chicken, salt it, do all the things, clean it, cook it. Why? Because it's better fresh. But let's say something was, we have the pickled salmon, right? And we have to make sure to make it a few days before because it needs time to marinate. Now, let's say you didn't. So, yeah, you want to cook it to eat it, but it's not like you need to do it today. You actually should have done it yesterday or should have done it last week. So there's a discussion about that. And again, I'm getting into details. In some cases, it's permitted if you do it in an unusual manner. But there is an issue that before we do anything of that sort, we should ask ourselves, is there some justification that it should be done today? Again, there's a question as to whether these things are rabbinic or biblical. But as a general rule, without getting too specific about it, um, if something would be just as good if you did it the day before, there really is no reason to do it on Yom Tov, then it's always better to do it the day before. If it's clearly better fresh, then that's when we say go right ahead and do it on Yom Tov. And if something would have been better before, or would have been just the same to do it before, but I ran out of time, then there's leniencies for doing it, but that's something to be discussed. And that's just the rule of thumb. Again, and most people cooking on Yom Tov is a very common activity. Washing dishes, obviously you can't wash the dishes beforehand; they weren't dirty beforehand. And even cooking, generally most of our food we cook fresh because it's better fresh. So in most cases, yeah, we only wash. That's the other thing. You have to look at both ends. What comes before and what comes after. You have to say, could I have done this before? And you also have to say, is this being used for today or is this really not for today? And that leaves, right, you can't wash things that right. Matter of fact, I saw something interesting, with the Erev Pesach being Shabbos, which is not going to happen again for a long time, apparently. They say, if you're going to use chametz and you're going to use, so we use the disposable dishes, but if you're going to use non-disposable dishes, they say, well, how do you wash them out? So, okay, so a minute ago we talked about how do you burn chametz? If you find chametz on Pesach, can you burn it? It's not really something you need. But even washing dishes, which isn't even really work. I mean, if you're using hot water, okay, the hot water is, uses fire to heat the water. But what if you're using cold water? What's the big deal? So apparently, even washing the dishes, because it's an act of preparation and it's not really something I'm going to use for the next week, that's considered problematic. I saw this in the Mishnah. I was a little surprised because, so what if you just don't want to attract fruit flies? So I've heard different things about this. Certainly, you don't need to wash it thoroughly to prevent fruit flies. Just quickly getting rid of the residue, rinsing off the residue. Someone said once, well, just put it in the oven and then you won't have to worry about the fruit flies. So I'm not sure. I've heard different things about that, but it does make you stop and think that it's not just even if it's not that I'm preparing for a different day, like washing out the chametz from my pot isn't that I'm preparing for a different day. I'm just getting rid of the chametz. But the bottom line is this pot will not be used till after Pesach, and washing dishes is an act of preparation. And getting rid of chametz is not something that I need. It doesn't serve any need. So even that activity is problematic on Yom Tov. Which leads to the question that we're a very familiar one, which is what happens when there's a Shabbos that immediately follows the Yom Tov. Mm-hmm. How do you cook? So we're familiar with something called an Erev Tavshilin. An Erev Tavshilin, and what does the word Erev mean? Mixing, right? Mixing, or merging, the merger. So Erev Tavshilin means a merger of cooked food. So what it means is that I take something that's cooked. People take a challah or a matzah and an egg, which is already cooked, and we say, cooking on Shabbos takes time. It's a process. And today is Wednesday. And then Thursday and Friday is Yom Tov. And then Shabbos. So today's Wednesday, it's Erev Yom Tov. And I have this piece of bread and I have this egg. So I'm going to use this on Shabbos, but I'm going to use other foods too. I haven't cooked all of them yet. So over the next couple of days, we'll be preparing for Shabbos. I started today. I'm going to continue tomorrow, the day after, right? And so by creating that bridge, we're then allowed on Wednesday or Thursday to prepare food that we need for Shabbos. Now, there's no question that the Erev Tavshilin is a rabbinic thing. So how did the rabbis allow you to do something that the Torah says you're not allowed to do? How did the rabbis allow you, based on this made-up thing called Erev Tavshilin, to cook food on Friday, which is Yom Tov, cook food for the next day, which is Shabbos?
Does the Torah say that is an absolute, or are there conditions?
So one answer is that the Torah has conditions. And we've said that you can't cook things on Friday, will only be used the next day. But according to some opinion, you can cook things on Friday that are usable on Friday, even if you don't actually use them. As long as you could use it on Friday, even if you don't actually use it on Friday. So according to this, now we certainly don't do that in practice, right? That certainly rabbinically is not okay. But on a Torah level, it would be okay. So the argument would be the following. According to the Torah law, anything that could be used on Friday can be cooked on Friday. So if I put up a challah and by 6 o'clock, still broad daylight and it will be edible, I could do that on Friday. Even if I don't plan to eat it on Friday, it's okay. I can leave it around till Shabbos. Now the rabbi said you shouldn't cook anything on Friday unless you really are going to use it. But they say, Haim Amru v'Haim Amru. The same rabbis who said, don't cook it unless you're actually going to use it, who said Shabbos is different. And to show that, we'll make this ceremony called the Erev Tavshilin. So it was really a rabbinic creation to solve a rabbinic problem. According to Torah, there's no problem. Because as long as I could use it today, it's enough. The rabbis were the ones who said, I can't cook something unless I'm actually going to use it. And they said, but you could do it if it's Erev Shabbos and you made the Erev Tavshilin. That's one approach to answering that question. There are other opinions about it. One interesting and important takeaway from that is that let's say you make your Erev Tavshilin on Friday and you cook your food and you put up the pot of food right before Shabbos. On a regular Friday, raw food. On a regular Friday, if you have a blech, you set it up properly, you could. But not on Yom Tov, because if you're putting food up at the very end of Friday, even according to the Torah law, that's not okay. You couldn't possibly use it on Friday. The rabbis can't solve that for you because it's the Torah problem. So relying on the Erev Tavshilin requires you to be mindful of two things. First of all, to make an Erev Tavshilin. Second of all, to only rely on it for things that you could theoretically benefit from on Yom Tov. Same thing, right?
Is that the purpose of the piece of matzah and the egg?
Well, the purpose is
you eat it on Shabbos.
You're supposed to eat it on Shabbos. The purpose is to create this kind of framework where I'm beginning my preparations for Shabbos already, and I'm continuing them over the course of Yom Tov. It's like a kind of symbolic, which kind of leads to an interesting point. Another kind of Erev that we usually use the word Erev for something which is not really an Erev, right? Something like the Erev that surrounds the community. It's not an Erev. It's called a wall. A wall, a bunch of doorways. There is an Erev inside the Erev, right? You have that box of matzah that nobody knows about. Right? So when you make an Erev around a community, like there's one around this neighborhood, that allows people to carry within those boundaries on Shabbos. That's not called an Erev. That's just called mechitzas, the wall around the community. But when you make that, you also need to have an Erev. You need to merge, right? Mix and merge the different houses. There's many different houses within those. Some public buildings, private buildings, even an apartment building, which has walls around it, or a hotel. Many different people rent rooms within that building, and then there are common shared spaces. So this is a rabbinic issue. It's a problem to carry from one apartment to the other, even if everything's surrounded by walls. Everyone has to combine into one big happy family in order to allow for carrying within that enclosed space. So we make an Erev. We merge everyone. We take a box of matzah, and Mr. Bloom and Rabbi Ackerman did this on Erev Pesach. Usually you do it once a year, and you keep the box of matzah around for the whole year, and then you make a bracha on the mitzvah of Erev, and I think Rabbi Ackerman gave it to Mr. Bloom, or Mr. Bloom gave it to Rabbi Ackerman. Either way, and the giver and the receiver symbolically gave its ownership to the whole community. Now the whole community owns shares in this box of matzah. It's sitting in there somewhere. So everybody in East Northport, everybody in East Northport lives here, and that allows us to carry within that enclosed space. So the question is, I think in the shul somewhere. The Huntington one is in my house right now because we had Mrs. Kluger on Erev Pesach, and we did it with Mrs. Kluger for Huntington. As a matter of fact, it said, I noticed that somebody just asked me. Yeah, she's just an agent on behalf of everybody else. Somebody just asked us something about what if the borders change, and I noticed because I was involved with it on Erev Pesach, the declaration actually says anybody who lives here or will live here within the border boundaries of the neighborhood, or if the boundaries change. So you can adjust the Erev during the year, and it doesn't compromise. But the question is, does the whole concept of Erev apply in Yom Tov? So the first instinctive answer is no, it doesn't, because carrying is permitted on Yom Tov. Right? So why does it matter if you had an Erev? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, carrying is only permitted for that day. So if you want to carry anything that you don't need for Yom Tov, you would need an Erev. On the other hand, why would you be carrying something for a different day if you can't prepare for another day? Right? So that's the question. Is there any significance to having an Erev on Yom Tov? What do you think?
Practical purposes, what if you're walking over to someone and you're going to spend the night and you have to take some things with you, like lots of diapers and things like that. So you don't need it specifically for that day.
So then what's the license to carry? Then you can't really carry the diapers. You have to bring them over before Yom Tov. Or if you need, let's say, 5 diapers, you may only use 2, but you can take a bag, which has 5 diapers in it, because it's packed into a bag. You don't have to unpack.
No.
Right. So it's a big question, actually. This kind of question, you're walking over from one day. How do you prepare stuff? What if you're spending one night at this person's house and one night at that person's? It's a problem. They say like taking a sweater. You go out for a walk, I'm taking a sweater. It might be cold on my way back, or I might come back after sunset. So that kind of thing, I think they don't consider to be an act of preparation, because it's just, when I go out for a walk, I take a sweater with me. It's kind of a something I do by rote without really thinking about it, and the other factors. But to pack a bag with my pajamas in it is problematic. But think about the following. Let's say, imagine the following. What if I have a bag, right? And the bag is, I go outside, and let's say I have a coat. And in the coat is my house keys. Hold on, let's not use house keys. Let's say I'm going to, let's say I have a medication that I take once a day. Something I'm allowed to take on Yom Tov, let's say, and I took it already last night. I'm not going to need it again until tonight. Tonight's going to be the next day, right? But it's in my coat pocket. I'm going out for a walk. Can I put on my coat and go outside with it? It's not an act of preparation, right? I'm just putting on my coat. So there's no problem. But if there's no Erev, then I don't really have a right to carry. I'd have to take it out of my pocket, right? On Shabbos, I got to check my pockets before I go outside and take out anything I don't need. If there's an Erev, I don't have to do that. On Yom Tov, I also have to check my pockets and take out anything that I don't need for that day, unless there's an Erev, in which case I don't have to check my pocket. So that's why it's relevant on Yom Tov, just like it is on Shabbos, because on Yom Tov you have to be mindful of things that you do that they should be for that day. The Erev allows you to be relatively mindless about carrying things. That's why it. Okay.
And when you're walking somewhere and you are gathering together your stuff, it's okay to take 5 diapers.
So there's a special. It happens with cooking as well. The way the Gemara says is, so if the Gemara says when you're cooking, like, can you cook a whole steak if you're only going to eat half a steak? So yes, but you cannot fry, let's say, pieces of chicken more than you need for that day because you'll have leftover for the night. I mean, if you say, oh, I'm having 10 guests and I might need 15 pieces, that's okay. But if you're saying I have 10 guests, I'll fry 30 pieces because I can use half of it for tomorrow. Okay, why? Because you're adding in, you're frying each piece, right? You're frying each piece individually, and at a certain point you should just stop. Why are you frying more pieces? That's for tomorrow. Even if you're putting pieces of meat into a pot, and you haven't put the pot on the fire yet, but you're putting 1 piece, 2 piece, we have enough for today. Why are you putting in more? If you're taking one item, let's say you have a pot filled with water. Maybe you filled it up with water yesterday. It's cold water. I'm going to put it on the fire. I don't have to say, well, I only need half the pot. Let me spill out half the water. That you don't have to do because there's one act. I'm not doing any additional work. And even if I'm going to use the extra water for tomorrow, that's okay. Just increasing the quantity without increasing the level of work. So that's if it's one act. So, if I have a bag of the idea would be if I have a bag of diapers. No, not okay, right.
You choose extra, but not a whole extra portion,
Right. Now, I believe, I would have to double check this. I believe if you had, let's say, I'm pretty sure if you had a pot of chicken in the fridge, right, a bunch of pieces of raw chicken in a pan, and you want to take it out of the fridge and stick it in the oven on Yom Tov, even if it's for both days, I believe that's okay because of one act. You didn't put them, assuming they were in the pan on Erev Yom Tov. You can't put them into the pan on Yom Tov and then put it in the oven because that's really multiple acts. You're loading the pan with extra pieces of chicken and then putting it in the oven. The fact that I put it in the oven in one shot doesn't take away from the fact that I put extra chicken in the pan for both days. But if I prepared it all before Yom Tov and on Yom Tov, all I'm doing is that, and I would be doing that anyways because even if the pan were half full, I'd still have to do the same thing. It's just a little extra weight. But it's really just one act, and that's okay. And I think it goes along with the fact that I could eat any of these pieces on Yom Tov. In other words, let's say it was half chicken and half meat, and I'm only eating the chicken today. I'm not sure if that's okay. That's another. And before Shavuos, we'll check it again and just brush up on the details.
So Kavana, does Kavana count?
Well, one of the interesting things about the laws of work on Shabbos and Yom Tov is the role that intention plays. And when we do Gemara, this becomes we analyze this. It becomes very important in many of the kind of foundational analysis because if you think about, let's say, lighting a fire, right? Well, lighting a fire is lighting a fire, but cooking is cooking. But fixing, right? Or writing. What is fixing? Fixing is making something that was not broken, making it usable. What is usable? Depends what you want to use it for. If I take a stick and I scrape it, and did I fix anything? Well, it depends. If I made it into a walking stick, then I fixed something.